What's up guys, this is TheKephas, and in this video I am going to showcase some macros that I have created for World of Warcraft with the use of a mod called Gnome Sequencer Enhanced. This mod allows you to create macros that can perform most, if not all, of your rotation with one button, which can be extremely useful for individuals like myself who have a disability, or for those who just want to be lazy. But you are still required to press buttons, control your character, and make choices, which means that using this mod does not violate the terms of service. Today we will be talking about Beast Mastery Hunters, but before we can understand how the macros work, let's first take a look at how the class is played. Beast Mastery Hunters rely mostly on their pets to deal the bulk of their damage. You can spend your focus on Kill command to command your pet to deal a devastating attack. Use this whenever it's available. You should also use Dire Beast whenever it's available. This will generate 12 focus and summon another beast to attack your target for 8 seconds. And your auto-shot critical strikes have a chance to reset the cooldown of Dire Beast. Once you've acquired your artifact weapon, you will also gain Titan's Thunder. This will cause all your pets to deal increased damage for 8 seconds, but you can only use it once every minute. You can also use Bestial Wrath, increasing all of your damage by 25% for 15 seconds. Bestial Wrath has a 90-second cooldown, but using Dire Beast will reduce this cooldown by 12 seconds. Also keep in mind that it may be wise to delay your other attacks to line up with Bestial Wrath if it will be off cooldown within a few seconds. For filler, you can use Cobra Shot. Use Cobra Shot enough to keep yourself from overcapping focus, but be sure that you always have enough to use your other abilities whenever they become available. And when you're fighting multiple targets, you'll do pretty much the same thing, but you can also use Multi-Shot to activate Beast Cleave for 4 seconds. This causes your pet's attacks to deal damage to all enemies nearby, so use Multi-Shot roughly every 4 seconds to keep up Beast Cleave. And that's a basic rundown on how to play a Beast Mastery Hunter. So now that we understand how the class works, let's take a look at the macro itself. We can /GS, and you can see there's one macro for Beastmaster, for single target, and for AoE, and it says to use Cobra Shot and Multi-Shot separately. We'll get into that in just a little bit. So we right click on the macro to peek under the hood, and I will say that if every class was as simple and as straightforward as Beast Mastery Hunters, I would have these macros on lockdown. Obviously, I always do the best I can to make this as simple as possible for people who need them, but this is as simple as it gets. So if you're looking for an easy class to play, Beast Mastery Hunters are by far the easiest way to go. So let's take a look at this macro. It's very simple, but it actually does quite a bit, more than you might think. Of course, it's going to have your pet attack your target, if it's in a target that you can actually attack. And that's good to make sure that your pet is always attacking in case you tend to forget to switch this back or whatever. It's going to make sure that your pet is always attacking something. Just be mindful that you're not using this macro whenever you have a target activated when you don't actually want to attack, because it will send your pet out to attack. So be very careful when you're using this macro. And then if you're in a dungeon, it will turn Growl off. And if you're not in a dungeon, it will turn Growl back on, which is huge. Actually, I should rephrase that. If you're in a group, it will turn Growl off, and if you're not in a group, it'll turn it back on. So that's really useful, because usually in group settings, you're usually doing like a dungeon or a raid, and you don't want to have Growl on. It's been a long-standing problem with hunters. We just tend to forget, man. Don't hate us. It's not our fault. It's easy to forget, a lot easier than you might think, and it's kind of a pain to have to go in and turn it off. So we tend to forget about it, but this macro will do it for you, so you don't even have to worry about it anymore. And then the last line is for misdirection. It will cast misdirection on your pet, but if you have a target focused, then it will cast misdirection on that target. So the idea behind this is that when you're out in the world by yourself, it'll keep misdirecting your pet to help your pet keep aggro. And then if you're in a dungeon, you can focus target your tank, and the macro will start to misdirect your tank. That's the idea behind the macro. That way it will make sure that it's using misdirection and you don't have to worry about it anymore. Of course, if you want to manage misdirection without the macro, just remove the line from the macro, starting with /cast all the way down to misdirection. Select it, and then delete it, and then save the macro, and you can manage misdirection by yourself if you don't like the macro handling that. And that goes for the growl lines as well. I just thought it was really easy to put those in there so you don't have to worry about it anymore. Now, as for the macro itself, it's going to use Titan's Thunder on cooldown if you have the artifact weapon, and then for talents, it's going to do Murder of Crows and Chimera Shot if you've taken those talents, and then it finishes things off with Kill Command and Dire Beast. It will use those abilities on cooldown, which makes it really easy because they both in fact have cooldowns, and Dire Beast can have its cooldown reset, which is just fine because the macro is going to use it whenever it's available. That's how these macros are designed to work. It will follow the priority. When one of these abilities is not available, it will move on to the next one and go all the way down. So then lastly, it's going to manage your cooldowns. We've got Bestial Wrath, Aspect of the Wild, and Blood Fury. If you don't like the macro managing your cooldowns, you can easily remove them from the macro. And one thing to mention, a lot of times it's recommended that you stack Titan's Thunder with Bestial Wrath, which does make a lot of sense. So it's not always going to do that with this macro because Titan's Thunder has a shorter cooldown than Bestial Wrath. They don't always line up perfectly. So if you want to keep up with that and make sure that you're stacking those two, the easiest way I found to do it is to remove Titan's Thunder from the macro, manage it separately, and then whenever you activate Bestial Wrath, which is really easy to see because you get red and hulking, then you can also activate Titan's Thunder and you'll then get blue and hulking, which is really cool. So you can totally manage that separately if you want to. It's entirely up to you, but otherwise this macro will manage it for you, and it's really straightforward. Now, the reason why Multi-Shot and Cobra Shot aren't in there is because we don't want to focus starve ourselves. If we put these in the macro, then the macro is going to dump all of your focus on a Cobra Shot or Multi-Shot, and that's not what you want. First off, you don't want to use Multi-Shot all the time anyways. You only want to use it every 4 or so seconds to keep up your cleave on your pet. So that's all you're using it for. So it makes sense that you're just going to manage it separately. And then that also goes for Cobra Shot. You don't want to use it too much. You want to use it enough that you're not capping focus, that you're using your excess global cooldowns, but you want to make sure that you have enough focus for your other abilities. So the easiest thing to do is just to keep Cobra Shot off the macro, and while this macro is managing all these other abilities, you can have yourself keep an eye on focus and then use Cobra Shot accordingly. For talents, the class is actually just as straightforward. Now, we're going to go over these talents in relation to the macro, so we're not going to go over each and every one of these, because most of them are passive, which is really nice, and then there are some cooldowns. So, for example, we know that Chimera Shot, and we also know that a Murder of Crows are in the macro because they have cooldowns. Now, if you go with Dire Frenzy, it just replaces Dire Beast. Dire Beast is in the macro, which means that the macro will use Dire Frenzy if you go with that. And then, of course, all these passive ones aren't really going to affect how the macro works at all. Of course, if you take Intimidation, I would recommend that you use that one separately. That's why it's not in the macro. Barrage is a very dangerous ability. If you're using it, you want to keep it under control. You don't want to pull excess mobs. That's how I remember this ability, so I tend to avoid putting it in the macro. It's also a channel, so you don't want to interrupt it by using the macro and spamming other abilities, so it just makes sense to put that on a separate button. Also, Volley is an ability that you turn on and off, so it makes sense to keep that on a separate button because it wouldn't work in the macro anyways. And then, of course, we've got Stampede, which is a 3-minute high bursty talent, and I feel like if you're going to go with Stampede as a talent, you should probably use it on a separate button and use it more wisely to get the most out of it. Otherwise, you can pretty much use any talents you want, and the macro is going to handle them just fine. As powerful as these macros are, they are far from perfect. So, if you want to play the game at a high level and get the most out of your class, I highly recommend that you play the game without these macros. But, if you'd like to get started with Gnome Sequencer Enhanced, you can do so by downloading and installing the mod. A link can be found in the description below. Along with it, you will find paste bin links for any macros featured in this video. If you'd like to use them, simply click the link and you'll be taken to a raw paste bin of the macro. Select the entire macro, copy, log into the appropriate class, type /GS to open the Gnome Sequencer screen, click on Import, paste the macro into the available space, make sure that Automatically Create Macro Icon is checked, and click Import. You can now drag the icon to your action bar and the macro is ready to be used. If you followed all the steps correctly, the macro should be working fine. If something isn't working, start over and make sure that you follow all the steps correctly. If you are having further issues, I recommend that you check out the mod page or contact the mod's author for more information. If you enjoyed this video, let me know by hitting that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. You can also subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter at TheKephas to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. Thanks for watching, have a wonderful day, this is Kephas, until next time.